Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about unlocking ad revenue in live sports streaming. This is a hugely important area for us at Dolby. And I'm pleased to introduce Dan here, who worked with us on collecting a lot of information from the industry. And it's really great to work with Dan again on this.
Hey, Paul, thanks very much. So welcome, everyone. Appreciate everyone being here. We know you have a lot of things to do during the day, so we appreciate people being on the line. There's a lot of data Paul talked about we're going to go through today. It's also going to be a full-on report. It's going to be free to download within the next week. Dolby's going to make available on their website. So let's just jump right into here. What exactly were we looking to find out regarding the survey I sent out? So the goal here is to provide accurate, up-to-date information that attendees like yourselves can use as you're making business decisions, right? How do you inform, educate, and empower others? That's the goal of collecting this data. And one of the things we wanted to do was we wanted to make it very focused, tied to sports streaming, which we all know is a very different type of stream out there when compared to other types of events or SVOD. Sports is where viewership is. Sports licensing rights, as we know, are very expensive. So we wanted to really find out from those who are doing this every day, what do they think where advertising is today, live sports streams, and more importantly, where it's going to go? We are still, I think everyone would agree, in the early stages of live sports streaming at scale with advertising. And there's been some interesting announcements in the last week by those that are doing live sports events coming up that we'll also mention. What we wanted to talk about was just first and foremost, what is the market demographics here? So I surveyed over 200 executives. They were all specifically tied to the advertising and tech stack in live sports streaming. You can see the company size here in terms of size of employees, vertical market. So we broke this down based on broadcasters, just like you would think of traditional broadcast, OTT streaming services, sports league teams, associations, telcos and operators who are actually pushing a lot of these bits, obviously through the last mile. Now, vendors who are providing some of these solutions. And others who didn't fit could be and were companies like those who actually license the content as opposed to those who deliver it. 57% of the respondents came from the US and Canada. And you can see the breakdown here from other regions around the world. So let's just start with the first one here, Paul. We obviously know when it comes to subscriptions and rights, the key thing here is how are companies going to monetize this further based on the cost that they're paying on the content. And right now, the numbers we're seeing in terms of what it costs to license sports content, and even some of the larger companies, Disney and others, who are passing on some sports content, saying it's just frankly too expensive and it's not a great investment for shareholders, as they like to say. First thing we need to talk about is just the ad revenue share, right? eCPM growth target over the next 12 months. So Paul, none of this data really here, that we collected surprised me in terms of what I'm hearing from content owners and broadcasters and really sports leagues out there. But you guys are obviously delivering a lot of this content. You're tied into a lot of this content as well, even if you're not delivering it. What are you seeing in terms of these numbers that relates to the customers you're talking to?
Yeah, so the customers we're talking to, at Dolby, we're really focused on the OTT providers and OTT providers that are doing live sports, as well as the leagues and teams that are doing direct-to-consumer streaming. And I was pretty happy, by the way, the number of respondents from both of those groups within the survey, Dan. And what we're seeing is that the sports leagues, they are trying to get revenue the best way they can, but they're trying to balance both the revenue from subscription plus the revenue from ads, plus also just growing their audience. And so what we're seeing is the subscription revenue is part of it. And a lot of our customers started with subscription, but they're really starting to get into ads as well. And I think this came out in the numbers that we saw in the survey. You can see OTT providers. Once you break up the numbers in terms of ad revenue share, you can actually, when you break up that per vertical, you can see that the OTT providers, they are they are very, so in terms of the growth, which we talk about on the right, they're really optimistic about the growth. OTT providers are actually expecting more than the 60 to 70, the 42% expecting more than 60% growth. With the OTT providers, they're actually expecting 75% more growth. So they're actually really bullish in advertisement. It's a very big growing space.
Yeah, they are. I mean, there's obviously a difference though between being bullish and what your target and what you're actually going to get. And to your point earlier, I think we all know, and I think everybody would agree that the sports services that are streaming live, they can't survive and monetize enough just based on subscription. To your point, advertising has to be part of it. And we're not at a point here where advertising is really targeted. Very few are doing DAI at scale, which, we'll see more of. But the 60 to 70%, over the next 12 months, the 43% that are looking to 60 to 79% over the next 12 months. I think that's unrealistic, frankly. It's too high a number. But also the other thing we don't know here in the report that we put out, we'll give more details, but growth based on what? Right? If you're growing 60% off a small base number, well, it looks good, but it's actually not that much revenue. So one of the things we're going to have to tie this to as an industry over time is revenue. It's going to have to be tied to revenue for sure. Paul, on this slide, what I really wanted you to chat about here is the key point here in terms of ad requests versus impressions, because that's really what this is talking about when it comes to eCPM.
Yeah, and I'm on the point about whether the growth expectations are realistic. I think that the OTT providers are saying that they're aiming for it, but it's not realistic because we have some other stats in the report, which when you get it around satisfaction about growth rates, and the OTT streamers are very dissatisfied with their growth rate. It comes out of 77% of them are very dissatisfied or just dissatisfied with their growth rate. So they're trying to get 60% more, but they seem to be pessimistic about their growth rates at the moment. So and I think when we start talking about the technologies underneath it, you can understand why they're a little bit pessimistic about it. And that's really what this slide starts to talk about. So here we asked about eCPM, which is effective CPM. The way we really ask the question is a little bit broader than eCPM. We're actually including the requests here because essentially eCPM is about the revenue divided by the number of impressions. But revenue is a wider problem. It's the revenue divided by the number of impressions that you want to get, which is requests. And so the reason why people believe they're not getting the right level of CPM, it starts with viewability tracking. And 47% of respondents say that viewability tracking is a problem. And this is really about did the viewer see the ad, but also how long did they see the ad? And the two parts of that is, did it actually happen and did you actually measure it? And what we've seen with some of the customers we're working with, the biggest problem is actually measuring that viewability and reporting it back to the ad tech platforms, or even just reporting it during their upfronts when they're negotiating the CPM. So viewability tracking is a big problem, and we're spending a bunch of time with our customers in this space.
Yeah, and that really comes down to engagement, right? Term I hate in the industry because everyone throws it out there without defining it. You've got Netflix that just put out a new MAU or MAV for, ad, which is really kind of silly because it doesn't tell advertisers much at all. And the limitation is so small. You got MAU measurement that doesn't work, and that's just users we haven't even gotten to ads. So the whole ad measurement system is an absolute mess.
Yeah.
Which I blame on the content owners, broadcasters, and OTT providers because they're allowing some of the vendors in the market measuring this to really sort of push it around. But I'm not too surprised, but that goes into our next slide just in terms of fill rates. Right? Low fill rates are still an issue for a lot of streaming services out there. And Paul, I don't know what you've seen just as a consumer, which we obviously all are when we strip ourselves away from the industry, but man, fill rates on a lot of the streaming services I'm still seeing for live events and others, just static tiles of like, this event's in a break. We'll be back shortly. Not even a commercial. So fill rates are definitely a problem, as we see in the respondents here.
Yeah, definitely. And I was actually surprised it's as low as 20%, which is really, really, really low. And what we're seeing out there, it's even a wider problem. We actually, you have a lot of issues just getting the, you build the ad, but no one's sitting there to watch it because people, some of our customers that request 30 seconds of ads for their customers in the future after they 30 minutes of ads for the customer after they join, but then they leave after 10 minutes or something like that. So actually filling ad slots is a problem, from filling ad slots where people are watching, plus also ad slots being abandoned essentially. So the reason I think that it's so low is that we're talking here about live sports and ads. And essentially, this is the most complicated place for ads because you have large numbers of viewers getting an ad break at exactly the same time. The ad breaks are unpredictable. How many people stay watching is also based upon how exciting the game is. And then so an ad can happen at any time there's an injury and suddenly you want to jump to an ad. And what you've got to do is get the ad inventory, and it's even harder if it's personalized ad inventory, ready to display to all of these viewers within, sometimes seconds. And so it puts a lot of pressure on the whole ad tech platforms. It's a super interesting space for us.
Yeah, that's obviously the future in terms of DAI. And by future, we've been talking about DAI for probably realistically 10 or 12 years in the industry. Almost none have done it at scale. Well, actually, it's never been done at scale. And that's one of the things that we asked here on this slide with DAI. Now, Paul, I think we do have to say, or I should say, when I wrote a LinkedIn post about Netflix announcing DAI for NFL games on Christmas in multiple countries, a few people were like, hey, this isn't new. We've done this. Well, yeah, it's not new, but it's never been done at scale. And by scale, I mean, there's never been a live sports streaming event with more than a couple million simultaneous streams or AMA, pick what you want, where DAI was implemented. I hear people say things like, the Olympics or an NFL game on Peacock. We have the stats. The viewership on that is 1.5 million, 2 million simultaneous streams, AMA. That's not scale to me. Netflix is going to be rolling this out in countries where they have more than 100 million members. That's scale. So let's see how they execute. I don't think they'll have a problem because they know what they're doing. But the point is, this is the first time we're going to see as an industry on Christmas with Netflix doing DAI at scale. And this is a big opportunity for the industry that we've all talked about. But one of the things we wanted to add here was, in terms of this survey question, was, well, who's actually doing it today? As you can see, you got almost 50% that are just testing it or piloting it. You have a small number that plan to implement it. And you have a small amount that are actually doing it for select events. The other piece I'll add, Paul, is there's also been events where DAI has been something that was going to be part of the stream, but because the ad servers couldn't handle the load, even though it was very small, it was turned off. So that's something that you're also hearing from people in the industry. But Paul, on the right-hand side here, when you look at what you're hearing from customers, how does this line up in terms of just platform support, scaling, and the technical implementation?
Yeah, this one was pretty predictable, but the top one being inconsistent device support. I think a lot of people have got SSAI going, but on top of SSAI, you actually have to start, to personalize the ads, you've got to get the device IDs, you've got a lot of signaling on personalization that you've got to get correct on all of the players. But also once you start getting into DAI, your ad inventory becomes much less predictable. So you can start having codecs changing, different codecs for different ads. You may not have your ABR ladders set up correctly. You have to deal with sometimes DRM of the content, not DRM of the ads. So it starts getting complicated dealing with all of these cases on the player side. And so this device support is hugely important. And it's one of the reasons why we're focusing with Dolby OptiView with our ad product. We're focusing on the player because there's a lot of problems to solve there. And some of the larger organizations like Netflix can deal with that themselves, but it just becomes really hard for everyone else to deal with all of the device problems.
Yeah, the technical complexity here is high. I mean, it's a big lift, and it's part of the reason why we haven't seen this at scale previously in the industry. Looking at what some people are saying here, right? They're talking about scaling infrastructure. Now, we don't know exactly what they mean by infrastructure, but viewer experience issues. If this doesn't work for viewers, they're not going to adopt it.
Yeah.
And if it's harder, to your point, in the player and devices, it's harder to adopt. So it's something that we're keeping an eye on in the industry. However, I have always wanted to say, I live in reality, not fantasy. And you have to look at what's actually being done today. And today, the implementation of DAI for large scale live event streaming, let alone sports, has been almost non-existent. So if Netflix can sort of set that bar on Christmas of, hey, this is where people should aim, I think that's a big stake in the ground for the industry. But we still have a long way to go before OTT platforms or content owners or broadcasters are seeing serious revenue tied to DAI. Let's go, Paul, into formats here. We've got a couple more slides here. We will take questions if people have them at the end. We're happy to take a couple questions. You can put it in the chat anytime you want. The report that we plan to put out in the next few days, it sounds like within the week, is extremely detailed. These slides are just very quick snapshots. The report is extremely detailed. It'll have a lot of additional questions answered. It'll answer a lot of your additional questions as well. So, Paul, let's go into ad formats here. I wasn't surprised that we had quite a lot just in terms of different types of ads: companion, full screen, overlay, pause ads. If we asked about pause ads 2 years ago, it would have been 0. Today, 16%, but we also know that's growing. Pause ads are getting super popular. Shoppable ads, 9%, not surprising. We're seeing more of that. It's very limited. What are you seeing, Paul, in terms of any new ad formats coming that may not be on this list, and or the ones that are growing the most on the list now?
Well, I think the customers we're talking to are really trying to, obviously trying to increase their CPM, trying to convince their ad buyers that they've got engaged viewers when they're selling the ads, which is super interesting. So obviously, more engaged viewers while they're watching the ad can leads to higher CPMs. It more valuable content. So I think it's really interesting where advertisers are looking at building brand recognition. And if they can do simple things like get overlays in the bottom right corner of the screen when a goal has just been scored, where you can have an amazing thing where you've got people who going for that team are really excited about what's happened, and that brand name is sitting there for brand recognition, increasing brand recognition of that brand at very personal moments for viewers, essentially when their own team is winning. So actually linking what's happening on the screen, knowing the relevance of it to the viewer, and then displaying an ad that can take advantage of that is a really powerful thing in the future. I think that's a space where you can really grow the value of ads. And that's just overlays. You can do same thing with double box and others.
I agree. I actually saw a demo from a new company in the space yesterday doing that and offering that. What I've noticed, Paul, is that most of that is done as part of the production element or play out in the cloud. It's not being triggered automatically. The ads are ready to go, and then someone has to sit there and be like, okay, because of this goal or this score, this is the ad to overlay. It's a very manual process. Over time, to really scale that, naturally, that's going to have to be done at some sort of automation. Can't have it be somebody having to sit there and decide every single time for every event. Let's go into just the innovation priorities and called it here. So one of the things I asked was just, what are respondents really interested in the most when it comes to technology in terms of what they're exploring? And we have things a little all over the map here: virtual ad placement, shoppable ad formats, ad personalization, ad formats don't interrupt the live stream. Pretty much all similar, between 10 and 16% of respondents. The largest one here being ad delivery optimized for low latency streaming, which we defined as less than 7 seconds. I understand that low latency streaming definitions or ultra low latency definitions are very different depending on who you talk to, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a streamer OTT provider. So that is just the way we put it for the survey. We had to put a number in there. So Paul, I would say that wasn't surprising to me. The AI detection of ad break moments, that's interesting. One that we hear people talk about, but we haven't yet seen it. Dynamic ad insertion for live streams, as we talked about, ad targeting. The way I look at this, Paul, is what respondents really said here is we want to do better targeting with better interactive ads for a better experience, because the end result here is for them higher CPM. Yeah, money. Now, as consumers, do we like this? Probably not, because it means more ads for us, more overlays, more interruptions potentially. But I did like the fact here that 14% said ad formats that do not interrupt the live stream. So what are you seeing as far as those ad formats, Paul?
So just on the spread here first, I see two things. One is dealing with issues. So that's ad optimized for low latency. It's just much harder to do ads at low latency than DAI for live streams. It's really hard to do DAI for live streams. And those are two key things that will enable sports streamers to get much higher revenues from advertising. But then a lot of the rest of it is around how do we make it less intrusive? How do we make it more, how do we increase the number of ad opportunities, and how do we make them less intrusive? And I think the AI for AI detection for ad break moments is really great, trying to pick or get additional ad break opportunities, but you can only do that if you can make them less obtrusive. Otherwise, you're going to start annoying your viewers. So the ad formats, I think, is where a lot of this innovation is. That when ad formats, but also when you play them. So when do you play a double box, and in a way that's going to create a great ad opportunity, but also not disrupt the viewers too much? When do you do an overlay? When do you do a full screen? Understanding all of this, I think, is a key part of the innovation here as well.
Yeah, I would agree. And also just, to your point, there are companies already trialing some of this stuff in terms of what they're doing, how they're doing it. People love to point to events in the space where, for instance, DAI is being used. But what they don't know is when you go and talk to the company, it's like, yeah, we're doing DAI for this particular event, but we're only allowing 10% of all of those who are streaming it to do DAI. And I compare it always to something like, Amazon with TNF, when they're doing some of the streams using Psi technology and other streams are not inside. Why? Yeah. The device doesn't support it. So there's also this notion out there of like, oh, hey, this company does it for this live event. We'll go talk to the company. They've only enabled it for 10% of their streams. That's not scale. But the good news here is it is something that they're trialing, they're working on, and they're waiting to just see. Another example would be shoppable ads. Look what Amazon's doing with Black Friday game with NFL to really push out shoppable ads. The first year they did that, it was great. They came out and said, the reason we're doing this is it's a test. We're learning. We want to see how well this does. So I love the fact that people are innovating. And that was the goal here in terms of this question. It's just seeing where they're innovating the most in terms of what they're interested in. So, Paul, with that, let's just, I'll turn it back over to you. We'll do some questions if we have them. I'll take a look in a minute. So we are going to have the complete findings free, available to download, very detailed report within the next week. Anyone who's watching this event right now, or you'll be able to get a link to the on-demand recording as well that Dolby will send out. But the key thing that we want to highlight here is the report's going to have a lot of really good information coming directly from the customers who are doing this today. It's going to talk more about what they're trialing, where they see the potential investment that they're making, and what they expect as far as an end result, what they want to get out of it. But this all has to do with one thing, which is how do we monetize live sports streaming outside of just subscription? That is the goal, and that is the key. So with that, Paul, I'll turn it over to you. We don't have any questions right now, but I'll turn it over to you for just final comments.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. It's always great working with you. You've got great connections in the industry and insight in what's happening with a lot of different companies. So it's always great working with you on these surveys. But at Dolby OptiView, we are really passionate about ads, funnily enough, because we are a very experience-driven company, and we want to make live sports. So we want to make them immersive, interactive, and personalized experiences that engage the viewer. But ads as part of this is so important because there's no point in creating engaging experiences if they can't be paid for. And I think there's been a lot of work in the sports space around that ended up in increased cost for rights, and it's being fragmented, and that's been done to drive subscription revenue. Ads is now coming along to supplement that subscription revenue in many places, or creating sports experiences that are fully ad monetized. So ads, you can't think about the sports experience without ads. And there's a lot of work for the whole industry, number one, to actually getting these new ad experiences and things like DAI running across all of the devices in the space. So there's a huge amount of work there. So this survey has helped us get more of a deeper understanding of what the problems are for each of these the verticals that we've been going after. The report has got a huge amount of data, as Dan said, but there is underlying data. We know more about exactly what the sports leagues' issues with DAI are, for example, as well as the DTC streamers, the OTT streamers. So if you want to get more detail of what's happening underneath that report, feel free to reach out, because we have a lot more insight that was really hard to share in the report. It got really long. So please reach out, because we are really passionate about this space.
Yeah, agreed. Now, trying to keep the report digestible, because to your point, reports can get very long very fast. But the reason I went back to the title slide here, Paul, is just so they can see how your last name is spelled. So if you have questions for Paul, just reach out to him on LinkedIn or me. I'm happy to answer questions as well.
And this stream will be available within 24 hours to people who've registered. So you'll get an email with a link to the recording of the stream. And yeah, if you're passionate about this space and want to grow ad revenue in sports, reach out to Dan and myself. We really want to engage with this industry.
Yeah, for sure. So thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate everyone being here. If you have any questions, reach out to Paul and I. Until the next time, everyone be well, be safe. We'll talk to you again. Thanks very much.